Welcome and happy Thursday. We're here with another nature mystic discussion on the Katari tradition of Peruvian shamanism with Zane Curfman. And we don't have an official topic today. We're just kind of go with the flow and see if anybody has questions or if Zane has inspirations
Yeah.
as to
Yeah.
what our conversation will be about today. But this is all gearing up towards next month's start of the next run of the apprenticeship program that Zane is going to be brought in to facilitate over 7 weekends, over 7 months. It's going to be amazing. So,
I'm real excited.
but
Yeah.
before we went online, though, we were talking all about the crazy time change and how it's all just foobard.
Yeah. It's lunacy. It truly is lunacy. I don't care which we would stick with, but I wish we would just stick with one. In fact, I kind of like the winter time because that would give us an hour later at night to play around,
Yeah,
in the daylight. But I don't know. I just I think it's insane that half of our country subscribes to that lunacy.
yeah.
At least half of the country, and that's just amazing to me that that more communities haven't started saying, you know what, we're not going to do it.
Right. I 100% agree. We do have people tuning in. We have a couple hellos. We have Kathy saying hello. And actually, I thought it was somebody else, but I think it's a bot that was talking back. Anyway, I don't know about Twitch. Melissa's the Twitch person. I don't know what these weird comments mean. So I will try to decipher.
I was updating the stream info on Twitch. Let me see. Chair Bear gave a hug. So there's a whole little emote thing going on. Hey, Chair, I have to shake my finger at you. We were doing the readings last night for you, and we didn't see you. So we're going to send a search party for you last night. Hello, Chair.
Very cool.
Yeah. Well, last night, Anthony and I also just kind of ran by the seat of our pants in the SOAR show, and it was beautiful. It was amazing. And, I really love that. I love leaving it up to the creativity of the universe to fill in the gaps of what we're doing and what we're approaching. But just to talk about the apprenticeship program that's coming up, I'm really excited for it. I was just looking through my memories, and if I'm not mistaken, 2016 is when we did the first official run of the apprenticeship program. Is that correct?
Yeah, but we were heading out in a snowstorm, if I remember right.
Yeah, so that was 8 years ago. And then 4 years ago was the first run of the completely online program because of COVID. And I tend to look at these patterns of 4 and 8 years as being significant. I look at those as being more significant to your life than any horoscope because your life moves in these 4 and 8 year patterns. So I was just pondering that last night and this morning. And that was really an amazing time. That first, when we first started running the apprenticeship program, and then when we had to change it over. And it's interesting that we're doing a hybrid program. So we're doing both that 4 year cycle again, and we're doing the 8 year cycle, and we're merging it together. And once again, it's the three of us that is presenting this. And I just can't help but feel there is some amazing energy to all of that, because I remember when we first started this thing, the amazing energy around it. And I'm just like, all right, we're doing it again. It's come full circle, and we've all grown. The tradition has grown. Everything has grown. And I'm just real excited to see what magic will come about from this run of it. It's an experiment, and I love looking at things that way. Just the playfulness of the universe, and how we're all part of it, and how this, I don't know. It just was something I was pondering this morning.
Oh, definitely. When we first did this, I approached Zane because I wanted to learn how to use chumpy stones because somebody gave me a set. And then I approached Melissa. I'm like, I want to learn from this dude, but I need a spot. And so we started hosting 1 and 2 day workshops out of Goddess Elite. But Zane was cryptic, man. That first run, it's just like, we're doing this thing. Can't tell you much about it, but we're doing this thing. And
well,
and it just kind of became, and it was kind of, as we've gone on, it's been able to have a little bit more definition and
it's interesting because I had already been teaching 12 years or so when I met you and we started that program. But that program was a start of a new run, of a new container, if you would, where I had, through the instruction of my own teachers, had started to notice certain things that the Western culture needed and needed more of, and that I could apply it to. And so that was the beginning of something very beautiful, was that first run of the program, because it was the first time that I unveiled. It's not entirely new. It's always based on the same processes. It's always based on the same flow of energy. But it was the first time that I was bringing into it this larger global perspective. Before that, it was always very traditional, almost to a flawed point, if that makes sense. It was always so traditional for me. And that first run, you got to see a lot of that, because,
Yep.
you know, my teachers didn't make notes for you. They didn't have handouts for you. And it was part of the tradition for you not to know what exactly you were entering into. And I still say to this day, if you're really going into something for monumental spiritual change, any tradition, it behooves you not to completely familiarize yourself with it. Because what ends up happening is you get expectations and ideas of what things mean before you go through it. And those ideas are based on someone else. And that's secondhand knowledge. And secondhand knowledge is considered a lower quality knowledge than firsthand experience in our tradition. So there's a reason why it's kind of veiled and cryptic in a sense, because we want you to have an authentic experience with it. If you're going to come in already believing you know what it all is all about, what's the purpose of even being in the program? What's the purpose of even, you know, joining up and testing these waters if you already have a preconceived notion of how it should go? You know, it's very much like the mystery traditions of Europe, those ancient mystery schools, where even though your father and grandfather and your grandmothers had gone through the same things you were about to go through, they didn't want to spoil it for you, because it's not about what they got from the tradition. It's about what you're going to get from the tradition. And that's unique to you, as unique as your fingerprint. The unique way that you're going to apply this medicine in your world. You know, I really want to say we're all healers. We're all teachers. That's part of what we are as human beings. We are always going to be teaching, healing, and working towards something greater in our communities. And that doesn't mean that you put up a shingle or you put up a sign saying shamanic healing's here. That's not necessary for this tradition to make you a healer, because we're really trying to step into a new age here. A new age which comes with the reemergence of the infallible healers, the people who have the presence that does the healing itself. And that's really where I'm focusing most of my energy these days, is on this new dimension of healing. And in that new dimension, we're talking about fields of grace. We're talking about presence and grace doing the work that was left up to the individual healer to do. And in this way, we can actually change communities. We can change lives of people who aren't even interested in the spiritual. That's really the beauty of it. We can actually do something inside of ourselves so that we shine a certain type of light that illuminates other people who have no desire to be spiritual, and maybe never will have a desire to be spiritual, but they see something in us. And in whatever it is, it might be a youthfulness they see around us. It might be an innocence. It might even just be a naivety they feel we have, that we are naive in the world. But whatever it is, it inspires them to be a little softer themselves, because this tradition is about softening us. It's about softening that exterior wall we've created, which is a bunch of defense mechanisms. And what are they defending? The wounds inside of us. They're defending us from feeling the way we felt in the past again, where we're really at a point where it's time for us to feel all of this stuff, reorganize it, and decide to do something different with it. Decide to take up leadership. That's another thing that I don't talk about a lot with this apprenticeship program, but I think both of you will attest, it creates leaders in the community. It doesn't mean that they have to be spiritual leaders that are saying, hey, we got to do it this way, because this is Aini and this is this philosophy. But they can lead by their presence, by their own quality of energy. And that's just something amazing. How many leaders I've seen emerge from the program. Of course, they were leaders before that. But something about this ancient school, this ancient knowledge, helps them to develop that quality within themselves, and then gives them the confidence to move forward. Even the confidence to move forward when they know, hey, I don't know exactly the answers here. I don't know exactly how this all plays out or what it's going to do. But if you have that confidence and you've developed that quality in yourself that you can handle whatever comes up. And part of that is wearing your mistakes on your sleeve. When you make a mistake or you goof up, just being like, yeah, I goofed up there. Yeah, that didn't work out so well. I see now that was a flawed idea to begin with. And that's something that's also very reassuring about this tradition. We're not saying we're perfected beings. We're saying that we are perfect in our imperfection, that through that human element that we are growing, and growing is organic. It's something that happens in little phases, like the moon cycles. It just happens little by little. We change a little bit, and maybe 13 moons later, we're a whole new person with whole new gifts and whole new outlooks on life. And that's really just so amazing to me. So I love watching the character development part of it, not necessarily people learning a bunch of Quechua words. That's here or there. They sound really nice and fancy, but if you really get to the point, hey, yeah, hello, Richie. Absolutely. Yeah. So, if we can just get to the point where we can start to be proud of ourselves, and not in an egocentric way, but we can find true things to be proud of ourselves for, and then say, you know what, I have something to offer this world. It's something unique to me. And as I offer it, what I'm truly offering the world is myself. I'm putting myself on a pedestal. I'm putting myself there for whatever comes, because I can handle it and I can move forward. And by developing that quality of handling whatever comes my way, we inspire others, and they start to say, well, what's this person got? What's this person have? And then you don't even have to go, oh, I learned this tradition. You can just bring it down to that homey, authentic knowledge that you have about life. Bring it out in your own words. You don't need, a Quechua word to give it credence. When I first started, the Quechua was very important to me because it gave us a lot of language that the English-speaking countries just didn't have for certain types of mystical experiences. That really was something that turned me on a lot. But as we've gone, there's these new frontiers in consciousness studies now. And there's some of them are as old as the 70s, 60s, and 70s, but they're just coming to light now and entering into pop culture now, the understandings of them. And computer science has given us all these words because they've done an extraction of human consciousness and put it into a machine. And by doing that, we had to learn a lot about our awareness, a lot about how we function, because we had to reverse engineer it. And by reverse engineering it, we got all these new, and I can't say they're extremely new like in the last decade, but all these new words that are coming up from information technology and from computer science, things like levels of abstraction. Now, these types of concepts, and even just the binary code, that gives us all these new English words that are more familiar to people that we can use to express what's going on. And, because we're now in a computer age where the children are more computer literate than their adults and their parents, and that's just going to keep happening, until we get to the point where computers are completely empathic with us. And you need no knowledge of how to use it because you've created a relationship with it. But yeah, so all of that is reasons why I'm so excited for this run of the program, is to see who are the new leaders that are going to step up, and how are they going to step up, and how does this tradition empower them in that? Because that's what it is. It's an empowering. If you notice, Melissa, Hank, and I, we're not carbon copies of each other.
Nope.
We don't dress the same. We don't talk the same. We don't present the information the same way. And that's what's so beautiful about this tradition. It gives you that right. More than that, it becomes your responsibility to make it yours, and to shine it into the world so that we are transforming this world. Because I really believe this is one of the keys. This tradition holds one of the keys to leaving a better world than we received, to transforming this world once and for all, to really give people some type of model so that they can start to make that change. And making that change in your life is what's important. You know, we often say we inflate issues. We inflate our personal issues into global issues because they are. And as we start to heal and start to solve something that we've been dealing with, a wounding that we've been dealing with, we're making, just by doing that in our inside of ourselves, we're making it easier for every person that was wounded that way to start healing. Because we are connected by a field. We are connected to the entire earth by a field, but there's also an interesting human field that we share. And ideas and things like that bounce back and forth. We can look at it as the advent of agriculture. How did agriculture, the growing of grains especially, how did that suddenly become a global phenomenon all around the same time when we weren't able to reach each other globally? We weren't able to tell each other we were creating agriculture and these farming techniques, but suddenly the whole planet, humans around the whole planet, in unison pretty much, within a field of about 100 years, all started to grow, move from hunter and gatherer to agricultural civilizations. And, you know, that's where the corn maiden comes from. In North and South America, she's called Mama Sierra in South America, but the corn maiden actually taught us how to civilize ourselves, how to become more civilized so that we can move from just being these tiny little clans and groups, that we could create greater cultures. And as we were able to create greater cultures, we're able to share more with each other. And as we share more with each other, technology started to be born. And that all comes from that wisdom of Mama Sierra, the corn maiden. You know, she taught us that originally through just how we were growing corn, through how we were watching and taking care of the seeds and crossbreeding the corn. All of this human ingenuity kind of was spurred on by that, by this advent of agriculture. Of course, we had ingenuity before that, but suddenly through this taking care of plants and animals, we opened up some compassionate compartment within ourselves where we started to grow community. And that is just an amazing thing. And all of these traditions pretty much come from around that same period of time. That's when the metaphysical world started to become a philosophy that people started to look at, that there was more than just the spirits of nature and the spirit of the sun and things like that, that there must be a metaphysical universe that all of this comes from. And that's when we got the feathered serpent teachers coming through North and South America, teachers like Huiracocha, who went and taught people how to do agriculture, taught people how to create these new technologies and these new ideas about divine sharing. You know, that's really a beautiful epoch in human history, and it happened all over the planet, it seemed, within 100 years. And how is that even possible? Because we're connected by a field of information that we're all part of. You know, it's just a beautiful thing. Anyway, that was my tangent.
It was a good tangent. I think there's a reference to that same phenomenon in like the 100th Monkey book. It's called the Maharishi effect, where a certain percentage of the species, if they reach a certain point of consciousness, it just automatically jumps to the rest of the species. And that's where the whole idea that if just 1% of the population could have this elevation, like when we talk about the fourth level healer, the Ultima Sayok, and that if there could just be enough to hold that womb for the rest of humanity to step into it and create from it, it's a similar concept.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's also kind of talked about in Sheldrake's work of morphic fields.
Yeah.
You know, of course, he was, as many scientists like him of his ilk, laughed at by the mainstream science because they're slow to change their views of these things. They don't want to admit, but of course, quantum theory is bringing us more and more into this field idea that there are fields of energy that arrange the atoms, that arrange everything and organize everything. So, it's kind of that old and new concepts merging, but it's still just theoretical right now in the field of science. They haven't started taking it serious yet.
No, there are some studies, but like to your point, they don't give them a lot of credit. There were in like the 100th Monkey book, they even talked about there were like different rat species in here in England, and when the rats here first learned a water maze, the rats there on their first hike just could swim through it, but they were from the same genetic pool, and there was just like a little bit of the fundamental research showing that they can't explain why that is, but they could show that that effect is true.
Yeah.
Or all monks meditating in a city and being able to see a correlation and the crime rate go down.
Yeah, it's beautiful because it points to something that we can't see, which is the field. That there must be a field of information, and this field of information must be able to inform everyone. Now, in our tradition, we totally understand this, and our primary thing is about developing our ability to maintain our energetic integrity, which is our field of energy. And our field of energy communicates with all the other fields, not just the human field, which it's very apt at doing, but it can actually communicate with nature fields. And that's where we learn to communicate with the spirit. We learn to communicate with it because that I don't want to call it an organizing genius, but that receiver is our heart. And that's what we're really learning. In our tradition, we call it munai, which is the power of love and will together. Without love and will merging into one power, we don't really have that pure power of munai. But when we have it, we can do amazing things. And that munai, what it really is it's the heart field. And the heart field, when we get out of our heads and we drop down into the heart, and we can actually start to live in the heart, what happens is there's an electromagnetic field that the heart produces, because the heart produces bioelectricity. Just in the fact that it pumps, just the current that's running through it. And it creates an electromagnetic field that has the potential to stretch out about 3 feet around your body. Now, of course, like all fields, no field just ends. It just becomes more and more subtle as it goes out further. But we see that 3 foot around us as the skin of our pokpo. So what we're actually realizing there is that we have this information field around us, but how we read it is not through our brains. It's not through our minds. It's through this other organ, which is the heart, which has over 40,000 sensory neurons in it, brain cells in it. We call sensory neurites. And when we start to use them, the interesting thing happens is that the biochemical brain in our head will actually take a second place to the brain in our heart. This is something that actually starts to happen as the heart brain becomes bigger and we start to function at it more and more. There becomes a coherence where this brain waits to be informed by this brain, and it bounces back and forth. And then there's something else that's amazing that can happen, which is when we learn to dial in our elevated emotion. I'm not going to call it anything more than that, because some people will say happiness or gratitude, and that's really not what it is. You gotta dial it in for yourself. Your elevated emotion might feel kind of like sadness to someone else. It might be like a calm sadness, and to other people that might be a horrible state to be in. But you learn to dial in your particular vibration, your particular elevated emotion that puts you into this higher state, and then suddenly the heart and the body come into coherence. Now the heart brain and the body brain are primary, and the intellectual brain is secondary. And the body wants to behave this way. We want to live this way. It's only been in the last 400 or 500 years that humanity has gotten so far away from what it used to be. We used to be so in tune with nature. Even that agrarian culture that spurred up before we modernized it, so that we had to pay less and less attention to it, and we genetically modified food sources so that they needed less of our attention. It used to be the spiritual path of many people. Still to this day, the elders of the Hopi getting on that crystal arc, getting on that spiritual ship for the next year is about planting your corn in the desert. It's about planting it and caring for it, not bringing a water hose out to it, but actually having to go to a natural spring, fill up a gourd and carry it all the way back to your little corn plants and feeding it. And that's why those elders will say, no, we can't go on a trip this summer because our corn won't survive, because we just started this relationship with this corn maiden, and we have to see it through. We have to watch every moment. We have to have daily communication with her, because she's going to tell us what she needs, and we have to address that. And that's all from the field of the heart. To be that in tune with your garden, to be that in tune with your animals, that's in the field of the heart. And then when the heart notices something's wrong, then it will send a signal up to the brain and say, hey, something's wrong. But if we wait for the brain to see it, what ends up happening is oftentimes it's too late. Oftentimes the ergot has already started growing in the corn, and it's already ruining the corn. By the time you get to see it, that fungus has already spread, and it's already spreading its spores, and more of it is going to grow. More and more of smite is going to grow. But if you feel it in your heart and you can notice it early, you can say, this plant's not feeling right to me. Something feels wrong with it. What does it need? What should I do for it today? And that was spirituality. I mean, really, that is at the basis, all of your spiritual senses coming into alignment. And, it was like that advent of our agriculture was to take us to a higher level. It was humanity realizing that it was ready for its next phase of evolution, which was adolescence.
You mentioned the spores, and it's a good time to bring this comment up. This was like 10 minutes ago, but it shows how much you and Judy were on the same wavelength. We're like mushrooms or something, connected by a vast, unseen underground network. And when you're explaining that feeling of the heart, when you also had the community of the village, all it would take is one person of a village to have the awareness that something's wrong with this plant. But as we became more separated, now we kind of lost that. We have forgotten that connection, not lost that connection.
Yeah. And if we look at nature, I mean, she gave a perfect analogy there, the mycelium network. The mycelium network is not just a way that fungus communicate with each other. They do, because they're one organism, but they're also separate bodies when they fruit or when they go into that sexual phase. But we have now discovered that trees communicate with each other through their roots by using the mycelium nets that have been grown by a fungus. So there is a symbiosis there where the trees and the fungus have grown together and know how to help each other communicate throughout the whole community. And nature has no problem with that. We used to think that we externalize and project what we believe about ourselves onto nature. And for a very long time, we thought all of these plants grew and they were competing for the same sun, that they were fighting for the same sun and they were trying to strangle out each other. But what we have actually discovered, especially through research in the rainforest of South America, is that the trees and stuff have a communal energy, and that they'll actually start to grow in different directions so that a young sapling has enough light to grow up. But trees move slow. It takes a long time to grow new cells so that you can bend your stalk and stuff. And so during that time, they try to feed that sapling energy through those same mycelium nets and everything. They send nutrients, they send all kinds of stuff. And we also have discovered that when a tree is cut down, the trees around it, their neighbors, will send sap down to that tree, that stump that's left. And sometimes that's why a stump can live for a very long time after the tree has been cut off. And those of us who are sensitive, sometimes we can go to places and we can see that tree standing there. Lilydale is a perfect example. There's a stump there that is basically completely encased in concrete now. Yet, if you look there, there is something about that particular tree where there is still a column of energy that goes straight into the sky. It's straight up, and it's like a broadcasting antenna. You get around that thing, and you can taste and communicate with everything that has touched that land. It's like it has a permanent imprint of every spirit that came through there. And that imprint is conscious and alive because of the unique energy grid of that place, that that it almost allows, I would say, the spirits to revisit the earth in that spot and to deliver their wisdom to you. They can tell you directly what's going on, what happened here. And when you're around that stump, you just kind of get attuned to mediumistic abilities.
It's very true. In fact, that's where it got its name from. When they founded that community, all the students would go back, and they found that when they stood in that spot, they just could get that connection easier. And then it's just been reinforced over time with how many message services have happened at Inspiration Stump. It's like staggering.
Yeah, absolutely. I had my own experience there.
Yeah.
And for me, honestly, of the whole place, and I'm not putting it down in any way, but at the whole place, it seems like that's the confluence of energies there. To me, it seems like that is what we would call a waka in South America. That is where the gods entertain. The nature spirits come, and they come right there, and that's where their offerings should be made. That's where the Hiwariquis, the despachos, the ofrendas, that's where they should be made. Doesn't mean you should litter that place, because you got to keep it pristine and beautiful. But make your offering, take it with you. They don't need it there. The offering itself is the food. It's the mikwishanko, the sacred food that we offer is that sharing. It's the aini that actually is the offering. All of the other elements that we put into the offering is a language with the divine, a language with the nature spirits, because they don't really talk like we do. We can translate their information into words if we want to, and into English, but it's so much more pure and beautiful if we just communicate with them the way they communicate. That just like in the program, you'll all discover something called Mastai, where we go out and we organize things in nature, and we let the free will of nature change that organization. And then we come back, and what we're actually allowing is we've created a map of our soul, and we've left it there, and now nature is moving the map of our soul around. It's changing the way these elements are interplaying in our lives. And that's the communication with nature that we're trying to foster. That teaches us how to step into a pure relationship with the pure spirits of reality. And that's something very beautiful. And it's something that just is hard to adulterate. Where if you're doing revealed scripture or prophecy in that way, and you're getting, this information, it's coming through the human ego. It has to. That's our instrument to understand. But there's another way that we can understand things on a very internal way. Hank sometimes says, yeah, you know that you know that you know.
Yeah.
I think that's how you say it.
Something like that.
Yeah, and there's something that happens within us in those moments where we don't have to understand. In fact, any understanding of what that information is corrupts the information itself. Often.
There have been times in deep meditation that I have an awareness or an experience that I know if I ever try to communicate it, I just lost it. Speaking of Lilydale, I know Melissa has been there many a times. Did you have any thoughts on that? And or I don't know, did you have any planned trips with the store around that?
No planned trips. Mainly because the Fun Fest hasn't come back yet. So that was always one of the big reasons of going, so there'd be extra to do. I personally, not around the stump itself, but walking through the less, I guess, popular areas of the forest, and kind of like that to me was more spiritually quiet, less chatter from all of the humans running amok. And so, the stump always has a constant flow of people going to it, and rightly so. And so I would find myself more wandering through the forest on the outskirts, and at one point got kind of lost for a couple hours because the left at that tree looked like that tree. And I'm like, well, eventually I'll hit a road somewhere, if nothing else. But Lilydale is a very unique area for what it offers. But I kind of think in a way, almost there's going to be sections of like that Appalachian area that's been touched in a way where you can get to the primal source of the nature and the beings and that are there.
I wanted to add something there because you brought up a good point. It's less chatty in the woods as you get away from the stump, and there's a reason for that. The stump is visited by many human spirits, not just incarnate humans, but they have discovered that this is a place where they can come back into a type of incorporeal manifestation, and they can communicate with us. So they stand around that stump, and they come and visit that stump often. So they're all talking with each other too. And everyone who comes there, a lot of times their family members who are departed are coming with them because they know that at that stump they can be heard. Mm-hmm. So it is a very chatty spot. Whereas you get further away from it, it gets more quiet, and you can get into the spirits, the pure spirits of nature. But that stump is an amazing spot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. I tend to wander away and go play in the forest rather than.
Well, I tend to stay away from that stump when any kind of reading's going on, because I'm not there for the reading. I'm there for the energetics that are there. So I don't mind being there after everyone leaves. But I don't, I'm not going there to get a reading or anything like that. I'm going there to witness what happens there. That's more my cup of tea.
But yeah, it's kind of interesting too to figure how Lilydale is in that Appalachian area, and there's so much mystery that happens, and stories and folklore. And
well, it's one thing I really find interesting. It's one of the oldest spiritist communities in North America, and all of the spiritist communities, all those old ones, there were some that were older, but they were all like cradled in that upper part of Appalachia. It might be because that was what was populated, but I don't think it's that. I think that there is a natural flow of energy that creates mediums within that. And that natural flow of energy, it's like all other sacred spots. It can also twist you up. It can get you really goofy, really strange. And that's just part of its energy quality too. And that's not to say that you shouldn't be there or you shouldn't live there or whatever. It's just to say that is what happens. And I think that's why places like Lilydale have such high criteria to live there, because they have to make sure you're not just going to go off your rocker while you're living there, because the energies can be quite intense. And that's all the way through Appalachia, especially the northern part of the Appalachian Mountains, that Pennsylvania, upper state New York, down into Maryland and Virginia. There is a lot of mediumistic ability that is kind of centered in that kind of area. And that's, I think that might be part of it, is that there is a certain line of nature energy that lends itself to that, because every waka has a line that comes off of it, has kind of trails that go in different directions from it. And I think that has a lot to do with it. I also think it has something to do with that Great Lake. I think that Great Lake is like a great scrying mirror, and it has that energy, and it might actually flow that energy down the Appalachian range,
Mm-hmm.
I have a question from Judy, right on point, and basically talking about the program and what the program would offer in terms of development to be mediumistic. If one has an interest in developing mediumship gifts, will the apprenticeship provide any foundation or transferable skills for that type of thing?
Yeah, it does. We don't always talk about it directly as that, but learning to communicate with the spirits of nature in their own language starts that. We have a special name in the tradition for the medium, and that's a kawak, and it means seer, or someone who sees. But it's unlike the Western idea of psychic sight. It's not necessarily I see, that you're going to go down this road and it's going to have a turn to the left, and and if you go 5 paces to the right, you're going to find a pot of gold or something. It's not really like that. It's not like a dream-like scene. It's like that knowing that we were talking about. It's like clairsentience in a way, where you just kind of have an overwhelming embodied knowing. And that is how the pure spirits communicate with us. And if we learn to communicate in that way, And I'll open this up to Hank and Melissa to share their thoughts too. But if we learn to communicate in that way, it amplifies any mediumistic abilities we have, any mediumistic gifts we have. Of course, not everyone is a Kawak. Not everyone has the ability to develop to some degree a Kawak, but not everyone is a pure Kawak. And the pure Kawak has the ability to see the flows of living energy and where they're leading a person or where they're taking a person. And it's not necessarily seeing events in their life, but seeing a flow of energy that can be altered and how to best alter that. Because the big difference between a psychic and a shaman is that the shaman sees areas of potential and possibility, and they can help direct you in a way that will lead you more toward that end goal. The psychic looks at you and follows the most prevalent line of probability from you, because there's no reason to follow any more others, because if you don't alter anything about yourself, that is what's going to come to happen. But in shamanic worldviews, we believe that every moment you can make a different choice that starts a whole new path, a whole new trail of possibility that stretches out in a different way. So, and gifted psychics know this too, and they'll kind of instruct you a little bit. They'll be like, well, I see things like this are coming up in your life. Maybe you want to make different choices that more align with this, because that's going to take you away from that. But that's not necessarily what you're going to get from a psychic.
Very good. And just to give an example of one that I heard before, is like everybody here that's watching, most people, 99.9% people can throw a baseball. Not everybody can throw a baseball 100 miles per hour and hit a little square this big. And it's just to say that everybody has the ability to some degree, but that gifted ability is what the Kawak would be. And thoughts on all that, Melissa, first? I just want to give that analogy before it fizzled.
I'm going to admit that I was answering chat, so half of me.
Well, what I would say then, from a spiritualist standpoint, because I'm a spiritualist minister trained through fellowships of the Spirit at Lilydale, the spiritualists are there to prove the continuity of life, and it's more important to prove that Uncle Joe's alive and all this. Where where fellowships they taught, you go to source first, reinforce with spirit. And when you go to source first, or the pure spirits first, you're teaching people to go to a much elevated space and place, and then the quality of information that you would get from Grandpa Joe, you can kind of test against an elevated perspective. And one example I had when I was doing a reading at God of Sleep, someone came in and they wanted to know if Grandpa Joe approved of their boyfriend or whatever. And I went to source, and the message was more like, yeah, this is like a soulmate. It's a great partnership or whatever. But when Grandpa Joe came through, he's like, no. And the truth was that astral level Grandpa Joe, nobody would have been good enough. It was 100% the correct message. Both informations were correct from a different point of view. And so when you start to look at these things, when you start to develop these gifts, you really want to stretch yourself to be the clear channel to go as high as you possibly can, then reinforce with the lower elements potentially. Yeah. But you're kind of filtering them through that lens of elevation and love that would come from the pure spirits and source and elevated ancestors and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. It's important in our work. That's why we work ancestor altars. And people, sometimes hear about ancestor altars from African traditions or from indigenous traditions around the world, and they incorrectly think it's ancestor worship. And they think that we go to the ancestors to get information about what we should do and what we shouldn't do. And the truth is, that's not what the ancestor altar is all about. The ancestor altar is a place where the ancestors can come, where they get a drink, where they get acknowledged, where they get remembered for a moment. And that keeps them from being hungry. That keeps them from being thirsty. That keeps them from meddling in your life to get your attention. Because just because they're dead doesn't mean they're perfected. Doesn't mean that they suddenly become an angelic being. The Grandpa Joe, yeah, there's an angelic aspect to Grandpa Joe, but it never identified as Grandpa Joe to begin with. It was always this other quality. So Grandpa Joe, when you communicate with him, you're going to get his prejudices. And yeah, maybe he wants everything to go right in your life. But you got to think about it. When he was alive, or when your ancestor was alive, did they give you advice that was good for your life? It might be good general advice, but did they really give you information that was really all that useful for you? If the answer is yes, like, oh yeah, I could always confide in my mom, and she always had a good perspective on things, then she might be a really good spirit for you to still communicate with at times. But if you had a real troubled relationship with them and they just didn't like what you did in life, you don't go to them to ask them advice for what you're doing in life, because they didn't like it to begin with. They're probably still not liking it over there. And that's something that we have to understand, is that just because they're dead or just because they're spirits doesn't mean they're elevated. Doesn't mean that they have this higher perspective of life. We actually evolve. I believe we elevate quicker in the physical realm than we do in the spiritual realm. Especially since there are some spirits that don't even know they're dead, that are still trying to just act out their desire in this world. And that's not to say they're evil or anything like that. It's just that there's different realms of these things. But the pure spirits of nature are something else. There's something else, because for the most part, they're still alive right now in this dimension. But the way they communicate is through the field. They talk to you through the field and through the energetic, spiritual, energetic part of the world. And when we learn to communicate in that way, I don't want to say we take the ego out of it, because the ego always has to be a part of it. We cannot outlive our ego in this world. We can't destroy it. We can't outlive it. We can evolve it, but it's part of us. And it's supposed to be part of us. We're never supposed to lose it as beings, as physical beings, because it's where we manifest. It's where we take all the stuff we've learned and we apply it in this world. And that's also one of the differences about shamanism. The spiritual paths of shamanism is it's about elevating and growing an ego. It's about really developing the ego so that you can use it in this world to make changes in this world. It's not just the path of a pure mystic who is trying to completely get out of everything egoic and just have this moment with the oneness. And all they want is the oneness. And all they go for is the oneness. And we have a cute little thing we say about that. We call it a path of slow suicide, because they don't want to be alive. They don't want what life has to offer. They don't want this journey. So they're wanting something totally different. And they're just practicing every moment of their life at not being here.
I wish they get that little Buddha up on the mountain.
Yeah.
Climb 3 days to go ask a question.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing, though, is the Buddha, it gets twisted a lot of times in our culture. But the actual path of Buddhism was about getting up there, having your experience, and then bringing that experience back to the human world. Not preaching it to the humans, not saying, oh, I had this experience, you better listen to me. But what that did to you, bringing the quality of what that did to you back to make life easier for everyone else. That is a path of beauty. You were trying to increase beauty in our world, trying to help people through the rough times, not trying to ignore that there are rough times and say, oh, if you just don't think they're rough times, they won't be rough on you.
Right. I would say, too, to kind of expand on Judy's question, it can help in mediumship, and it might even open up other possibilities that you didn't think you could do in forms of communication with spirit. So, and I always found it funny the first couple of years when we would get into, I think it was part of the Death Rites weekend or the weekend after, when we would be, it's essentially channeling. And I didn't call it that. And the whole time I'm kind of sitting back, kind of snickering. I'm like, if he told them they were channeling, they would just lose their mind, and the fear would immediately set in.
Yes.
The
left side teachings for sure. Yeah.
So, which I'm sure that's going to change a little bit this year, since we're half in person, half, but that was always a fun one to kind of watch in the beginning of the day. You know, you would see your timidness in some people, but by the end of it, like they would kind of get really comfortable and allow it to happen and realize, you know, that you can't control it and it's a new thing to experience and it's not bad. So, but yeah, the channeling.
The embodiment of that energy. And, you know, of course, there's I won't go into all of it, but there's deeper reasons for all of that too. There's things that it's doing to us to have that experience. You know, basically to have an experience of the spiritual incorporation of some, and not everyone can incorporate to the same level as others. You know, everyone has different skills with that, but just allowing yourself to have that cooperative incorporation changes something inside your energy field because you just added something to it. You just downloaded something else into you, and certain qualities, certain behaviors, certain powers of that thing that has entered you for a moment, that those become little seeds inside of your own energy because the fields have met. And then if you continue to do things that foster that seed, it continues to grow within you. And that's something beautiful too that we don't always talk about when we're talking about channeling and all of that. Oftentimes people think, oh, you know, it's just something that we do as a service. But that service goes two ways. You're serving the spirit with that and helping the spirit to get more of a message through and more of a pure message through. And at the same time, that spirit is helping you to evolve in this world. That incorporation actually creates a lot of interesting spiritual dynamics for the growth of our spiritual self. And I think that's just something that sometimes isn't always communicated with that, you know, that there is this potential of growth on both ends of the spectrum.
So throwing it out there, questions, comments, that was a lot, I know. And we were talking about some cool stuff, but if that prompted any other questions or comments or anything like that, now's a great time to text them in. But I will say that that's probably one of my favorite weekends that we do. Yeah, they're all my favorite weekends, let me be honest. Well, they all have their own different specialties, you know.
Right.
But,
that's the other thing about this whole tradition, though it is a flexible framework. The way I was trained is very flexible. There is an underlying pattern that plays out. Even though sometimes teachings float around on that pattern in different places, it's not a college course. It's not an academic course where you have to follow a strict procedure to get the outcome, to get the result. It's actually much more organic than that. It follows the kind of trilling motion of nature, you know, that spiral motion that all of nature has. It follows that, and it's sometimes it's very malleable, and I love that aspect of the tradition. And what that allows for is a great amount of personal freedom within it. You learn that malleability, and that malleability becomes something that gets seared in a way into your soul. It becomes part of your outlook on the way things are, part of your outlook on the way these spiritual workings operate. And when you get that, you get a more flexible way, and it just doesn't have to be one way or the other. It doesn't have to always follow this strict, you know, this strict formula to present itself. And that's something very beautiful about it.
Cool.
Nice.
Just waiting. We're also almost to the top of the hour, so we'll say last call for questions and comments. And I have in the video description, there's links to Melissa's site, there's links to my site, both with apprenticeship information. The apprenticeship will be occurring at Goddess Elite for our home base with nature excursions on this. Well, it could be on either day, but usually we do it on Saturdays. And then online content in between. So it's a hybrid program, and we want to make it accessible to everyone. So if you look at all the options and it's not quite fitting, but you know that you've heard the call, then make a call to me, and we could talk about what's possible. In fact, I'm going to be talking with someone at 11:30 today about a possibility. So there's my text number. You can call or text. Text is better. And you can reach out to me and we could do that, or just check out my website, book a clarity call, and then you can see me. We'll do a Zoom, or stop into the store and talk to Melissa a little bit, or stop into my office. I'm in Westlake. She's in North Olmsted. We're just 10 minutes away. So it's not too bad.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, if you feel it in you, and it's a yes, if you feel a yes in you, don't put it off, because these opportunities don't always happen. And that's not to create urgency or anything like that. It's just the truth. These opportunities don't always happen. And other teachers in my tradition don't have the same theos I have. They don't have the same ideal of this being a spiritual service for people. You know, so yeah, and I'm not putting them down. I'm not saying their teachings are good because of that. They're pristine as well. They're beautiful as well. But they're not always as accommodating as we have been able to be. You know, we've been able to create something that really does accommodate to the student and makes it more about the student than about the teacher. You know, it's really about you being able to digest this information, you being able to use it. And if you feel called, come to us, because we'll figure it out.
Yep. Very cool. So let's see if there's anybody frantically typing a final question or comment. But I'm really looking forward to this year.
People who watch like the replay and are like, oh, I wish I could comment.
Yeah, well, we've had a lot of, well, that's true. If you're watching on a replay, please message me or message Melissa and message Zane. Probably me is the best one, because I'm the one that works out the talks between the two of them, because we all have busy schedules. But we'll figure something out if you feel called.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool. And well, we got one person saying not me, but we've had that she doesn't have a question, but we've had people consistently. She's still trying to absorb all the information you're giving us. See, I was trying to click off of one comment and then another popped in, and that came up without me.
Well, that's cool. That's a great comment to
pop. Yeah.
A lot is delivered, and you know, and you'll learn this also in the apprenticeship. I usually, oftentimes, before we go into a deep teaching, like that, I try to get you into a trance state, because we do most of our work in some form of a trance
You're
state.
Really good at it too, by the way.
And that is to kind of dissolve the barrier, because words are a barrier. Though they're the best thing we have to outwardly communicate, what I want you to get from the program is not my words. If you memorized every word that I said, and that's what you spent all your time doing, you missed it. You just missed it, because my words cannot express it. It's what I'm radiating. It's what I broadcast out. The words are just a way that I direct my intent to broadcast.
Yeah. I know last time we had the online apprenticeship, when I was a mentor and I would have my weekly calls, someone would ask a question and I would say something to the effect of, oh, I don't know what Zane would say about that, but, and then I don't know what came out, but I'm like, I think I got that from Zane, but I'm not 100% sure. But it sounded reminiscent of something Zane might say.
I hear a lot of my students say that, and that is something in this tradition. The lineage is alive, and it's been alive, and we feed that lineage, and they're around us. So me as a teacher, my spirit kind of stands with you as someone who learned from me. And my teacher spirits stand with me and stand with you, and their teachers stand. So it is actually a tradition. It is actually a living tradition that the lineage is concerned with the survival and with the emergence of what is possible within it. They have seen what's possible, and they are always working toward growing that. And so that's something that we don't always talk about, but you're actually receiving a lineage of masters. Yep. A lineage of teachers.
I keep Zane really busy, because every time I open up space, one of the things I'm calling in after I call in Quichi is Don Zane, though. I'm calling him in. I'm having him here working with me. Now, as a final question, someone sneaking in under the gun with 1 minute left. No, we can go over the time. But they ask, how do you recommend a person to start connecting with nature or communicating? So if you're just on the stream today and they may not be in a position to work with you directly, what one thing might you be able to say that could help them to start to have that relationship with nature?
Cultivate a passive mindset. Go out into nature, and when you first get out in nature, your head's going to just speak and communicate, and you're just going to keep saying things to yourself and running your internal monologue, and that's okay, because the truth is, contrary to spiritual beliefs, the internal monologue never vanishes completely. You might have the experience of it being gone, but that doesn't mean that it's not still going. There's millions of thoughts that go through your head every minute that you have no conscious awareness of. And we have actual filters that filter out different layers of it. But just go out to nature and develop a passivity. Develop that quality where you can be in nature and be part of nature. And if you don't understand what I mean, go out into nature and find it. That's the only way to do it. You can't conceptualize it first and then go out and do it. Not this kind of a thing, because all those concepts are expectations that you're putting on the experience. And then you'll say, well, it didn't turn out the way I thought it was supposed to, and so I must not have had that experience. Because the analytical mind's major job is to say, that isn't that, this isn't this, no, 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 no. Because it's to keep us safe, and it's to keep us understanding things. We're not trying to understand. Communication with nature is not about understanding how it works. It's about experiencing it working. So go out into nature until you have a communication. And many of you have people who love to go fishing, and they might not even care about catching the fish, but they just for some reason like that being on the boat or being by the lake. And they like to throw out their line and just feel all of that. And there's just a moment where they become part of nature. That's the communication.
I remember one story that you told me, or you told the class, and you were in Peru, and like you're just on the trail for like a long time. It takes a long time to go from place to place when you're going up to Caros and everything. And at some point, you just like I don't remember the exact description you gave, but like it was almost as though like there was a condor that made a noise or whatever, and it had to because there was no other way it could be. You were that part of nature that you were experiencing everything as it was unfolding, and that really came from like a mass immersion of that passivity. So that might be another thing, like go out and be passive, but if you have the opportunity to immerse yourself, that would be, I know not all of us have the luxury being in the cities and whatnot, but an immersion of something like that, like how you would immerse yourself into a language if you want to learn a language, and how much more quickly you can pick it up. Immersing yourself into nature could also help with that passive.
Yeah, absolutely. Awareness. And another thing that could help is right now it might be still a little too cold, at least on some days, but everyone has access to nature. You can go out in your backyard, you can lay down a towel or a blanket, you can lay back on it, and you can look up at the sky. And you can just keep looking up at the sky. And maybe you see some clouds. And at first the clouds are forming shapes and you're naming every shape and all that. And oh, the cloud looks like this for me. And your internal monologue is being projected into the cloud, which is pretty amazing. That your internal thoughts have this way of projecting themselves onto nature. But then there just will come a moment where you'll just be noticing the clouds. And a moment where you realize that cloud and you aren't so different. And that you couldn't be here right now looking at that cloud if that cloud wasn't right there right now being looked at. And what ends up happening is subject and object start to blur. And that's where the communication comes from. It doesn't come from me being here and receiving the information from nature. It comes from the moment when I no longer think of myself as separate from nature. I no longer feel the separation. Now I know I can't be here right now if that cloud wasn't there right now. That we are united and connected, and that it requires every element of nature that exists at this moment for me or that to be there.
All of creation would not, or what was the way you said it? All creation had to unfold exactly as it had from the beginning for this auspicious moment for you to be here right now, listening to what I say. Not anything different. And it wouldn't be. It would be something different then.
And that's how omens and synchronicities work, which is the most pure form of communication with the spirit world, is when things start to align in front of you and you just see it unfolding. And for you to understand that not one element of free will has been violated, that everything from the beginning of time has played out in this way so that this omen or synchronicity could unfold right in front of you while allowing every one of those elements complete free will. And when you start to notice things like that, that is when you're really tapping into that realm of communication, when you're really tapping into the eternal moment, and things are really starting to cook and move for you. That is the moments we're looking for. When we can step into chance occurrence and we can see it as spirit speaking to us. And we don't need spirit to say, we don't need like reassurance that, oh, this chance occurrence came up and I have this opportunity to do this thing. And I think that's going to be really cool. And I say yes to that thing. It doesn't mean it's a success. It doesn't mean that there can't be a failure there. It doesn't mean, and that doesn't mean that you misinterpreted the signal. There's something that grew in you from taking that chance. There's something that transformed in you. And that is communication with the universe. That is the real mystical art. And stepping into that mystical art, that is when your life starts to change. And it doesn't mean you understand where things are going. It just means you're picking up on clues as they're presented to you and you're following the information. And you might even come to a place where that whole movement ends in something that you might see as failure or the world might deem as failure, but that doesn't mean that it was a failure. What grew inside of you by taking that chance? How did you change by taking that chance? And who were you in those moments when you took that chance? And what did you broadcast out into the world? And how did that change other people's lives that you'll never know the name of, that you'll never even see again, that you never even noticed when they were beside you? But during that time, when you felt that the universe had conspired on your behalf, what did you broadcast out? That is true gratitude. And what you broadcast out changed all of reality. Cool. And even if you don't understand how it plays out in the end, that's not for you to understand anyway, because you, once again, you following your path of free will, you are becoming omens and synchronicities for other people that you may never even have met before. Maybe we're out at a nature spot and someone sees me with my Misha just talking to the spirits of nature, and I don't even notice them. And then they go off and they have their own experience. They have their own experience that they saw someone being so weird that they'd hold up this little blanket full of something and be blowing on it and having such reverence with nature that it allowed them to go and have more reverence with nature. And they had their own experience and they never even had to join the tradition or anything else. And those experiences enrich their life so much that no matter how their life plays out, they feel like they're part of something greater. Wow. And that is what we're really doing in this. That's what it's all about. It's not about those moments that we understand and know. It's about you have now become part of this field that is communicating with the rest of the universe all the time. And you don't even know it because you're just following your own free will through it.
Wow. That was great. And the person who asked the question says, thank you. That was a lot. And Barbara was just saying, I appreciate all of your help raising the vibration of the planet. And that is a great note to end on because we're a little bit over time. But we'll be back next week, probably with Zane, unless something changes. He's free for the foreseeable future on Thursdays. So we look forward to having Don Zane, though, again. And hopefully we'll see you next month for the apprenticeship.
Yeah, absolutely. Get a hold of us.
All right. Bye, guys.